Okay, so let's start the interview. So we're gonna be talking about the paper titled "Exploring the Impact of Gamification on Engagement in a Statistics Classroom," and it is authored by Eilidh, Craig Alexander, and Eleanor Jones from the University of Glasgow and University College London. Okay, so let's start with asking you to briefly describe what your paper is about.
Yep, so I guess in general the paper describes our experience of using gamification to try and tackle low engagement that we were seeing with flipped learning in a large level 1 statistics course at the University of Glasgow. So a bit of background, we introduced active learning to a large level 1 statistics course. We get roughly 250 students in that class per year, so it is quite a big class. And we introduced active learning through flipped learning. So essentially students were asked to complete some online activities on our virtual learning environment, which we use Moodle. And they were asked to complete those before the lectures. And then the lectures, or the in-person sessions as we were calling them, were designed to be a bit more active. So rather than just going through a standard lecture, we were saying, okay, you've prepared for your lecture in advance. Now let's try and apply some of those methods that you've read about and you've completed activities on, and do that a bit more interactively. So students were able to solve some problems by themselves or in groups, and there was a bit more of a discussion, as much as you can with a large class because it's difficult. We were using sort of polling systems to get people to input their answers and then having discussions based on that as well. So that was the idea. Unfortunately, it came to light quite quickly that students were not preparing for those in-person sessions as we had hoped. And in fact, the engagement was really very low. So we were actually able to check on Moodle how many students were completing those activities. And it started off quite low and it got lower as the semester went on. So basically students were showing up to our lectures. We were assuming that they had prepared and they hadn't prepared. And then we were delivering a session where we were asking them to apply these methods that they should have read about and they hadn't. So we were in this awkward position where we were trying to be a bit more interactive with our in-person sessions, but students weren't able to keep up because they hadn't prepared. And so rather than just sort of bin the idea of flipped learning, because we really wanted to try and promote that as a learning style, we thought that we could try something to motivate the students to engage in those pre-session activities a bit better. And I had come across a plugin for Moodle called Level Up, which is essentially a gamification plugin where students can earn points through completing activities. So you can essentially set it up completely how you like on Moodle. You can assign points for different activities. And as students complete those activities on Moodle, they get points and they move up through levels. So it becomes a bit competitive, I guess, and a bit of fun. We wanted to make sure that that was completely endeavour based and not merit based. So there was no credit for the level up system at all. It was all just, if you want to get involved, if you want to work your way through the course using this level up as a bit of motivation, then feel free. If you're not interested, then you can just completely ignore it. You can still engage with all of the pre-session activities. You just don't even need to look at the level up plugin.
Yeah.
So that was basically the intervention that we put in place to see whether or not we could try and tackle this low engagement.
Yeah, very interesting. I think the problem of disengagement is all worldwide. It happens the same in my lectures. Students are very disengaged, but the idea of using this sort of framework for getting points and getting the students to be more competitive by engaging with the activities is a very nice idea. So can you tell me which are the key findings or the outcomes of your research?
Yeah, I'll speak to that, Paul. So the main thing that we found was The interaction from the students when it came to the gamification was a lot better than we had initially expected. The students were very engaged with this and very involved. This did lead to a completion rate in terms of the activities, in terms of the pre-lecture material. This increased by roughly 45% after we implemented the gamification aspect within the course, and students were completing these activities now kind of prior to the lecture, which was ideally the thing that we wanted to see. So this was a big positive, and the rate of engagement, the increase was, it pleasantly surprised us, I would say. It was quite a stark jump in comparison to previous years before we'd taken the intervention. We did also ask the students how they felt about the plugin, just to make sure that this was having the effect. It wasn't just a kind of once in a blue moon cohort effect that it was to kind of do with the gamification. And the students' feedback was generally very positive on this. They suggested that it made them feel more motivated to engage with the course and complete the different pre-lecture activities. So yes, as an overall summary, the kind of main finding was this did have a significantly positive effect in terms of engagement with students when it came to completing these pre-lecture tasks.
That sounds great. I think a lot of students really are competitive, and that
Very.
really makes the difference.
It was quite nice as well because there was an individual component to it. So there was a leaderboard where everyone was ranked individually. Now that was anonymous. You could see your name,
Yeah.
but you couldn't see. You could see what level or what ranking you were, but you couldn't see who was above you and who was below you. But we also incorporated a team element. So we put them into teams based on their tutorial groups, and then we had a team, so we had an individual prize and we also had a team prize. So I think that was quite nice because in these large classes, especially in first year, students don't know each other very well, but it incorporated a little bit of sort of team spirit. And our tutors, who we have a group of really great tutors who help run our tutorials, they were almost as engaged as the students were, because they were saying, look, we're top of the leaderboard, you have to keep going, make sure you're completing your activities. So it was nice, because I always feel with a large class it's really hard to get that one-on-one sort of interaction, and you feel as though you're just talking to a sea of faces. But it really it made me feel more part of the class than I had in previous years. And I had students coming up to me and saying, I know this is stupid, but can you just double check that I've made sure I've got the points for this thing? And it was quite nice just having that element to the class. It was good fun.
So my last question is, what insights or lessons can we derive from your paper for the teaching and learning of mathematics?
I mean, I can start off, Craig, and then you can jump in. But for me, I think the biggest thing I've learned throughout this whole process is there are these different teaching techniques that you can adopt, and they sound great on the face of it, but the implementation has to be very, very carefully thought out. So it's not something that you can say, right, I'm going to adopt this new technique, it's all going to work perfectly first time and it'll be great. I think we learned the hard way that actually the students have to be as invested in it as you are, otherwise it's not going to work. It also takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to set up some of these. So for the flipped learning, we had to create all the pre-lecture activities. It's quite a lot of work to actually just make that change in your course compared to just the traditional lecture style. So it's worth the investment, but it's really important, I think, to keep track of what's going on. If you can you monitor how students are engaging in your course? If you've got a small class, that's maybe slightly easier because you can talk to them a bit more one-to-one. For us, it was really helpful being able to see and track on Moodle how many people were actually looking at these things beforehand, because we had those statistics available to us, which was really, really helpful. And I think it's important to take ownership of the fact that, okay, this is not working. I don't need to just completely throw it all out, but what can we do to try and make it slightly better? As you mentioned, Paul, engagement with students is getting worse and worse, it feels, every year. So anything that we can do just to make that a little bit better, I think is excellent. And I think the setting we had was quite nice. We were a large first year class, so the stakes aren't really high, so you can introduce that fun element without it seeming silly, I think. And it was for our students their first experience of higher education, so it also gave them a little bit of help just scaffolding their learning a bit, because they were able to see very, very clearly, if I complete these activities, I get my points and I'm moving through the material for that class in sort of a structured way, which I think really helped as well.
Yeah. So basically, just rounding off what Eilidh said, I think from what we found is kind of adding in this element of gamification, particularly in these styles of classrooms where the classroom is large and it can be hard to know the students on that one-to-one level, and particularly in these levels where the students are coming into university and you can introduce things that are a bit more playful, as it were, and a bit more rounded. That can have a nice boost on motivation and engagement, which, as we know, can be a struggle, especially with earlier cohorts, and just helps them adapt a bit easier into university as well, and can engage with a learning style as flipped learning as a learning style is potentially something they've maybe never come across in secondary education. So it can be quite new, putting the onus on the student to prepare the learning beforehand. And this intervention we found really helps motivate the students to help them engage. And lastly, it's just a nice bit of fun as well. The students are, as Eilidh mentioned earlier, they're really enthusiastic about it. We get several questions about points. If they feel they've lost some points, they'll make sure they get them back, which is all part of the fun as well. So, and it's nice as it creates that kind of what I call a kind of friendly competitiveness, and it's just kind of based on their kind of own endeavour to do the work. There's no measurement of merit attached with this at all. It's just about them applying and trying to work hard. I think that kind of leans into the strength of using gamification in this way.
Well, thank you. And we encourage our readers to read the full paper and to try something like this for their own students.